Welcome to the latest edition of the OmniTalk Spotlight series, the series that highlights the companies, the people, and the technologies that are shaping the future of retail. I am your host, Anne Mezzenga, one of the founders of OmniTalk, and today we're talking about how retailers are preparing for the year ahead and the tools and technology that they are turning to in order to retain staff and maintain retail momentum after the holidays. Now, joining me for this discussion today is Christian Floerkemeier, the CTO and co-founder of Scandit. Christian, thanks for being on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get started, I should note that this will not be the last time, Christian, that you and I are meeting, because we are going to, we're going to consider this more of a Scandit amuse-bouche, if you will, because Scandit, Christian, and your team will all be heading out to NRF in a few weeks. And you guys are going to be one of the sponsors for all the content that we're putting out during that event. Plus, we'll be hosting a very exciting and fun after party right the first day, Sunday night, right after the first day of NRF. And so OmniTalk listeners, you should reach out to us if you want to get put on the list, right, Christian? Any like dress code or anything we need to know about for that event, or just come as we are?
Just come as people are.
You'll have a velvet rope, but if you know Christian or you know OmniTalk, you're on the list. And again, we are doing this as a LinkedIn Live event. So if you have any questions as Christian and I get going, or for the teams at Scandit or OmniTalk, you want to get put on that list, you can text them in the chat just to the right of your screen at any point throughout our conversation. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Christian, let's dive into it. I'm going to go right out and say it. I think when a lot of people hear scanning, they're immediately thinking of, a checkout or a barcode reader in an app. But there are quite a few uses for Scandit's technology that I think people don't quite know about. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of Scandit and what you do and what the company does?
Yeah, totally. So, at Scandit, we provide smart data capture solutions for enterprises and enterprise applications. It really started at Scandit, when you look at, 10 years back or even 5 years back, you had to go on and use one of the dedicated hardware devices to have a reliable and swift scanning. And at Scandit, we took a software approach, leveraging smartphones, ML, and computer vision technologies to really provide the same scanning performance in terms of swiftness and robustness that a dedicated device has. Where today, even today, some people always think like, oh, camera-based scanning on a smartphone is slow. That is true if you sort of grab off-the-shelf consumer solutions, but with leveraging the cameras, the sophisticated CPUs and GPUs, the way we were doing this on smartphones, you really have the same scanning performance in terms of robustness and speed that you can get with the clunky high TCO devices that are still used largely in the industry. And at Scandit, we really also look at like, how can we change from what was always the standard way of doing this, one barcode at a time, maybe with a shared device, and how can we leverage the capabilities of smartphones to do more, to do multiple barcodes at once, immediately create, augment the real world with virtual information, so that you immediately see like what products, what price labels need to be updated because there's a promotion. To count using technology. So instead of the user counting, make your smartphone count for you, right? And so this notion of smart data capture is really something that we've been establishing across many different processes, from promotion execution to making receiving faster, to make stock takes and stock counts faster, and really providing, at the end of the day, really the store associates with superpowers, right? Like to make them more flexible. And in some way, there's so many tedious tasks out there that with machine learning and computer vision and the right sort of camera technology can really be addressed. And that's really what Scandit is all about. Today we have a strong focus on retail. We also sell into TNL and healthcare and other companies. 8 of the top US grocers use our technology. And with literally millions of users every day scanning in high volume applications, where this is image recognition, text recognition, barcode scanning, but always with a strong focus on the actual use case.
Well, Christian, we got to unpack that a little bit because you just hit on so many things that are really troubling retailers, I think, right now, and especially as they're trying to plan for next year and what to expect. But some key things that I think we have to point out that you mentioned are, one, being able to quickly change pricing and to make sure that your pricing is competitive, that promotions are in place when, your customers in the store have access to their mobile devices right then and there, and they're making very price conscious decisions. And if you don't have those updated, it means a pretty significant lack of ROI, I think, for retailers when they're looking at, not putting the right promotions in place. So one major area there. The other thing that I want to hit on is, you mentioned planning orders, inventory accuracy. We've seen retailers really push flexible fulfillment in their business. This is table stakes now. This is not, an option. Like, we have BOPIS, we have curbside pickup. You have to have some kind of flexible fulfillment option. It's how customers are making their shopping decisions. How that puts quite a significant demand on store employees and, overall store operations. Can you give us some examples of, maybe some places that Scandit is helping some of maybe the grocery partners you mentioned or other retailers right now?
Yeah, so, Scandit really, helps in these use cases with, the smart data capture technologies I mentioned earlier, right? And this is for when you're doing flexible fulfillment, you're typically talking picking, you're talking staging, you're talking destaging, and then actually handing it out if it's curbside pickup, or BOPIS, handing it out to the actual customer, where depending on what goods you sell, you actually need to do some age verification to make sure that you're not losing your license. So and we really provide capabilities for on the smart data capture side, but also all the way down to like the full solution, like the best device. While we don't provide hardware, we bundle our solution with the best smartphones on the different operating systems that match performance, because not every smartphone is the same, not every accessory is the same. We've done, from the deployments we've done, we sort of know what does the store associate really need in terms of what's the best accessory, how can they hold the device in an easy enough way, what ruggedness would you want to go and add with which accessory, what smartphone do you want to pick in the first place, right? Are you looking for large real estate on the screen? Are you looking for optimal performance? Are you very cost conscious and you're really looking at $120 Android device? I think there's many different options. We've seen retailers really looking for guidance on how can you deploy at decent TCO, better TCO than today, be more flexible. And then the other part to this is really the ergonomics and the benefits to the store associates, because let's be real, right? If you need to go pick 8 hours a day, that's a really hard job, right? And it's super important that you actually end up with a solution that is ergonomic. We've seen retailers deploy BYOD solutions, so where they
which is bring your own device, right?
Exactly, right? Where people bring their own device, their favorite iPhone that they're working with, and they have an outstanding scanning experience and overall user experience on those devices. We've seen retailers deploy not just company-owned devices, but personally enable them, right? The idea that you reduce churn, you make it attractive for your store associates to have that connection with the business, because they can use that device not just in the store as your picking device, but it's actually a device that is suitable to make a phone call in the pub or text someone, right? You wouldn't take your scatter gun home to go and text your friend.
That would be hilarious. That is a great
really
SNL
benefit,
skit of somebody with a scanning gun, just like the 80s mobile phones. But I do think that's an important thing to point out, is that in this time where we're trying to get associates, it's the number one thing we hear from retailers right now is their staffing shortages. We can't find people to do the job. So no matter what, technology we have in place, no matter what operations we have set up, we need the people to do the picking and packing like you're talking about. And I think that it's, you mentioned using smartphones to do this. I mean, it's getting a scanning device that you're not familiar with, that's not a mobile device, is a new thing to learn. That's an entirely new part of the on-ramping process. Can you talk a little bit about, Christian, what retailers have been seeing that have worked with you in terms of deploying the Scandit platform on these mobile devices? Are they having success in, more quickly on-ramping staff and the familiarity that the staff might have with, using their own device or another one?
I can tell you a very interesting story. So we used to,
yes,
we sometimes, I say quite frequently, the store technology teams are typically, they've been buying the dedicated scanner guns for years. They've been working with them. They provide swift and fast data captures, no doubt. But it's been really working for the store technology guys, right? Because they're super rugged, they're heavy. Yeah, so if you drop them, they're not going to break, right? So it's been working for the store technology guys. But it wasn't actually, we saw in our users, it wasn't really working for the users at the stores, right? So, so store technology guys were actually really skeptical about smartphones, they can drop. And I'm like, no, you put a rugged case around them and they will be just fine. Yeah. And by the way, if this is a copy device, the store associate will really look out for his device. So you don't need to go and worry about it breaking. And because they're not just going to throw it in the corner, because they do want to call their friend in the pub in the evening with the same device. So, so it's a very different mindset, but still, right? Like we typically we see challenges where the store technology teams, the hardware folks, sort of are skeptical. And we went with a very large retailer in the US. We said, okay, let's set up a trial. We're going to find 10 of your pickers. We're going to deploy our full product Opus, in-store picking solution. On a smartphone with a modern user experience and you know what the feedback was? Like we ran afterwards, we put them through their hands. I think it was 16, 17 pickers. They were doing this for 2 or 3 hours. And we, within the app, we had like a questionnaire where we asked them like afterwards, like, hey, would you consider using this solution? Does it scan fast enough? So, very objectively in that sense, like, we set up a scientific experience, right? And you know what the feedback was? It was actually really surprising to us too. They said, the best thing about this is I don't have to press any buttons. And we were like, I hear this all the time. It's just like, oh no, if you have a scanner, you need to have a button, a physical button, and one on the left and one on the right, because some are left-handed and right-handed. The pickers didn't want any buttons. They love the fact that on a smartphone, you can just, with the light touch of your thumb, you could activate the scanner and scan immediately.
Right.
And we sort of dived in and said, like, well, look, I pick 1,600 products every day. I also, each one I need to do a scan on the bin. So that's 3,200 scans a day where I press a button that's actually quite hard to press, so I don't press it by accident.
Right.
That is really annoying.
Right.
And the fact that I
wouldn't have even thought of that. Yeah.
Right. We weren't thinking this either. We were thinking always like, oh, the smartphone in some way doesn't have these physical buttons, but the users don't want these physical buttons. They're just happy having a touch display like we all love from our iPhone days, right? Right. Where we or smartphone days, and you just press the button, you tap the screen, activates the scanner, scans milliseconds later, and then the next thing was, hey, this is we built an app with like a really nice user experience, right? Swipe left if the item is out of stock. These sounds like real trivial things in some way. If you are coming to this from a mobile app perspective, if you're coming from this from a traditional sort of dumb data capture perspective, right? No, you didn't do this. You had to go and click 5 different buttons to then sort of select like, oh, this item's out of stock, right? So when you look at this, and especially if you're attracting, and I think this is the real trend here, right? Like maybe traditionally you would have people who've been working that same job for years and they're just used to a certain way of doing the jobs. Now, to actually fulfill these orders, you need to get folks into your stores that haven't had that training.
Exactly.
That haven't had that experience. So, and they don't just, like if you have, I sometimes joke, right? So they likely have like the iPhone in their pocket. It's not like they have, so they know what's out there. So it's like they're arriving in a Ferrari at the store, right? And then they get this Lada, like this 20-year-old, car to do something else. That sounds ridiculous, but that's really what it is, right?
No, I love that analogy. I think that's perfect.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, so I think to attract folks. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. I mean, I think that's a really brilliant part of this is that you're replicating things, movements and touch points and things that people are already doing in their day-to-day lives, and they're able to go walk in and operate a store with some of those same movements, the swiping, the tapping, like instead of, like you said, pulling up and trying to operate a 20-year-old car. Christian, I'm curious, what the next question that I'm sure people that are listening with us live right now are going to ask is, what does that mean from a deployment perspective? Like, is this integrating into somebody's, flagship app, or, their operations back of house app? Like, how are you putting this in there, and what's the lift, I guess, from the retailer side?
So we're well aware of this, right? Like, so end of the day, we provide for retailers that want to move to a whole different app experience. We sort of provide mobile workflows to make this make this easier. But generally, there is some existing infrastructure that we need to integrate into. And we provide, on the one hand, we provide integrations into sort of common ISV systems to make that easier. But then really at the app level, to just to make that lift a little easier, to go and move from say laser scanner gun API where to a camera-based scanning, it requires a few changes to your application, and we provide like a migration package to make that easier, right? Where with solution consultants, with code samples, and actually with resources at your side, we'll transition this. It's not a huge lift, but it requires something, and we've seen that as internal development teams have maybe have not been exposed to the API, you can really look like when we're bringing our resources, or actually really our partners' resources that specialize in this, can really move that forward with sort of a fixed time frame, fixed time resources, and take that friction of how can I actually migrate to say smartphone-based smart data capture to really take that very out. We often see folks thinking like, oh, this is a big lift. My IT team is already like overloaded. How do I get this into my sprints, and how do I get it in there like fairly quickly and not 18 months from now, right? And we have these migration packages to make that easier.
We've been talking about in the store, delivery to customers' homes is one of the biggest trends of late, especially, delivery that's adding alcohol as part of that delivery. I think when we were at grocery shop, we saw that, having alcohol as part of the delivery was increasing order volume, at basket size, like 20 or 30%. Especially like some of these players, the instant delivery players that are doing 15-minute or less alcohol delivery. Age verification has to come into play here. That's a major liability for companies. You guys have been doing this for a long time.
Yep. No, and I think, when you really look at this, I think it really would, accentuated in COVID times, right? Restaurants closed, bars closed. So, booze was being consumed at home, right? And this is, people went to the stores and bought it, but also increasingly, like the online delivery of alcohol just really skyrocketed. We know this from some of our customers in that space that really picked up, right? There was no more in food distribution, the food wasn't, the alcohol wasn't delivered anymore to the restaurants, but it was delivered to the consumer at home. And when you really look at this as it's a liability, I agree with you, but it really becomes a commercial risk. What we know from our customers today,
tell us more.
Right, is it's you can go and look at the fines, but my understanding is the fine's actually not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that you lose your license, and you lose your license to sell alcohol. And if you lose your license to sell alcohol, you don't just lose the alcohol revenue, as you said, but you lose, entire customers, because they will go to your competitor that is actually selling or delivering alcohol, right? So it's actually really big numbers. And when you look at this, it depends a little bit on the states that you're operating in, but the majority of states, they're really on this, right? And it's very easy to see, like training is super difficult. Like if you have gig workers, to really train them to make sure that you manually check the ID, that you look for the right things on the ID, it's almost, you just can't manage this. It's just as an enterprise where you're operating at scale, the fact that some inspector is going to find someone who doesn't properly check it is really significant, right? So we've seen like the leaders in that field, when you look at like Instacart, when you look at a Shipt, who've been doing this at volume, right? To them, they need an automatic solution. What I mean with automatic is that you need to be able to read any ID, and the user in that sense doesn't have to do anything. It really just needs to scan the ID. The ID picks up all the information on it.
Right.
And And even in those cases where the ID is damaged or slightly damaged, provide the capability to read the front of the ID if the barcode is damaged on the other end. So really a foolproof solution where you don't rely on the gig worker to ever enter the data manually. Because the second you're in that spot, it becomes very, very difficult to make sure that you had all that training in space. So basically someone cannot deliver unless the ID was captured with a smartphone-based solution. And we've seen, and that's really being the trend. And when you look at this, our customers out there, they're like optimizing their compliance rates for this because there's so much money at stake. So it's not in some way like a nice to have solution in some way, right? But it's like a must have, solution for their business, because if they suddenly start, can't deliver anymore in the, I don't know, in the state of, Nevada or California, I mean, you can imagine how much revenue is associated with that.
Absolutely. I mean, this is too competitive a space right now to give up any share. And alcohol, you're absolutely right, Christian. I mean, alcohol delivery as part of that instant delivery, that grocery delivery, it will be imperative as we kind of continue on into 2022. Christian, what's on the horizon from Scandit in 2022? I know you're going to be at NRF, but I want to, can you tease anything? What should we be looking for? What is Scandit going to be investing in? We definitely talked about, flexible fulfillment and empowering stores to be able to do that better. Employee, like making the devices smarter and more intuitive so that employee onboarding can be done better, faster and simpler. And of course, we're talking about the alcohol delivery and ID scanning, but what's next?
So, I mean, really what we're hearing from our customers is that we talked a lot about like fulfillment and in-store picking and, the really high volumes and associated cost of doing this. And one of the drivers that we heard from many of our customers is really all around how can I make, even shaving 1 or 2 seconds off my picking cost per item, it's millions down the road. One of the key drivers of that we're seeing is actually most folks provide location information as they're picking. Like the next item is on this aisle, this bay, this shelf.
Sure.
But you need accurate inventory information or accurate location information for this, right? If someone just moved this, then what's the picker going to do? The picker is going to go and start looking for example, and it creates tremendous delays and potentially also substitutions, which we're not going to be selling, because your product or inventory localization data is inaccurate and not in real time. So we're going to be launching autonomous and also mobile-based solution to provide better real-time visibility into where things are. Really with the goal of making all these picking operations more efficient and avoiding the fact that someone doesn't really know where something is. And then on the other side, really about, I think you mentioned that early on, all about, promotion and price executions, right? It's actually for the worker quite a tedious task to go and make these updates, then to also go and check them. And with our smart data capture capabilities, we can provide on one way a solution to this much more efficiently. And much less tedious for the store associates with significant efficiency gains, right? With 5x, 10x efficiency gains, doing the checking. And I think that drives it, right? Like right now, a lot of retailers are looking at how do I bring my customers back into the store, because that's still it's a very, very efficient way to do business, right? So you need to go and make it attractive. You need to go to promotions. We're looking at AR promotions, with our augmented reality solutions, but even just in some way that the non-personalized plain promotions in the stores, how to execute that better, how to make sure the promotions are actually up, or like taken down at the right moments, and providing computer vision solutions to solve these problems. That's sort of key topics for us for next year.
That's fascinating. So what does that look like from me as an associate's perspective? Like, am I carrying the same device and going through? Like, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like just for somebody?
So on the promotion execution, when you do, like, what does these processes exist today, right? It's quite tedious. If I don't know, if you and I had to go and do this job, like this is tedious, right?
So manually change price tags.
Exactly.
It's not fun.
Exactly. But and even if you just want to go and check it, is this promotion accurate? Is it not? Right. So you go in or price, you go in, you scan the barcode, you turn the device, you look on it, you're saying like, oh, this is $199. You look at the label, $199, and then you do that for another 30,000 SKUs.
Right.
So, when you typically don't do 30,000 SKUs in one go, but even
Yeah.
if you're doing 100, right? Like after 50, you don't even
Yeah.
spot the mistakes anymore, right?
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so we provide a solution for this that brings in AR, that actually checks the labels themselves. It reads with text recognition all the information on the label, reads the barcode, looks it up in the database, and then provides an AR overlay to tell you, oh, this one is right, this one is wrong. So you're literally just going along, and it highlights to you which ones are right, which ones are wrong. And we're not doing it.
So I'm holding my phone up, scanning the shelf, and it's just like bing, bing, bing,
bing, bing,
red,
exactly.
red, green. Like, what are we looking at?
Exactly, red, green, and says like, oh,
Okay.
this one needs to be replaced. So then you can, if you're doing your promotions with a mobile printer, you can just go in that moment, go like needs to be updated, replace it, or you just rip it off. So very, very, for the store associate, a much easier task, with the benefit that from a management, shelf management perspective, you also have proof that things get updated, right? Because you had the scans, right? So it's, there are some analogies there to the ID verification, right? You make it easier for the store associate in this case, but you also, because it's an automated, or at least semi-autonomous solution, you also have to prove that, it did get checked and it's actually correctly updated, right? And it's a little dependent on what kind of price labels we have. But we also provide the solution that you can actually do it on the entire shelf. So you don't have to do it one by one. Depends a little bit on the price labels, but today already for a lot of different price labels, we can actually do it for 5, 10 price labels at the same time. So you really have like 10, 15x time savings doing this. And you have a digital twin of your shelf, right? So you actually know, like, okay, I'm selling these things, then they're arranged like this. So down the line now you can leverage that information for your in-store picking, right? If you don't want to deploy robotic systems, but you want to leverage this technology, it's a very easy way of sort of start building digital twins without deploying significant additional hardware, right? It just runs on your existing devices that you're deploying in the store. If you have smartphones deployed, it runs on your smartphones. And really, with that goal of, I think always the mix, right? Like what I said earlier, superpowers to the store associate, but at the same time, you get just, you get much more digital. You actually know what your store looks like, not what the planogram says, but you actually know what your store looks like.
Right. And no buttons to push. I'm not pushing it.
No
You're not relying on me as a new
I
associate to tap in what the correct price is. It's just printing out for me. I love it.
Absolutely.
Oh, Christian, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I'm sure our audience did as well. If people want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about Scandit, they want to come see you at NRF. I think you guys are in booth 509, if I'm not mistaken. Where should they go to talk to you, Christian, and learn more?
So definitely, come to our booth at NRF. I think you can also, find me on LinkedIn or just email me at christian@scandit.com. I'm happy to take any questions and go into more details.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's been Christian Floerkemeier, the CTO and co-founder of Scandit. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you weren't able to join us here, we'll be sending out a recording of this. And please feel free to put any contact info or anything you'd like in the chat before we wrap up. And as always, be careful out there.